What's up guys, my name is Liam, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the brand new SteelSeries QCK Performance Mousepads. There's no question that the QCK is a legend in the esports scene. When taking a look over at prosettings.net, the QCK Heavy is still the #1 most popular mousepad used for CS2 pros. And SteelSeries has put a lot of effort into the development of these new Performance Series mousepads, having fine-tuned the surfaces on these for over a couple of years. They've even been testing them with professional players, and recently FaZe's Rainbow Six Siege team, 3 of their team members, Handy, Cyber, and Souls, just recently used them to win the Rainbow Six 2025 Invitational. So in this video, I'm going to be going over what their picks were out of the 3. This does come available in a control, balance, and speed option. I'm also going to be going over how my experience has been with them so far. I will be comparing them to some of the competition out there, and hopefully I'll be able to help you decide whether or not either one of these could possibly be the perfect gaming mousepad for you. So let's check it out. And before we get started today, I did want to let you know that these were sent out to me. However, everything you're going to be hearing in this video is going to be my own words and my own opinions. At launch, these are going to be available in 2 different sizes. The first option is going to be coming in at 490 millimeters in width by 420 millimeters in height. Then the second option will be coming in at 400 millimeters in height by 900 millimeters in width. And these are all sitting at 3.5 millimeters in thickness. They did send out all the different options and sizes for me to test out, and I'm happy to say that the build across all of them, regardless of what size you get, they're all going to be similar to one another. So just keep that in mind as we're going forward and going over all of the details here. The base is made out of a high-grade neoprene foam, and the feeling of it when you touch it on your skin, it does feel very sticky and rubberized, and these pads have been sticking very well to my desk as I've been using them. I'm a huge fan of these SCR style bases, as they are still plush so you can push into them, but overall they have a bit more of a firmer feeling, so they feel a little bit more consistent for me in my gameplay, and it has really solid elastic properties with a really fast rebound. All of these pads do have stitched edges, and the stitching looks like it was done really well on these, as it does sit slightly below the surface. They do have their logo down here in the bottom right hand corner, and it is raised up on the surface, so if you were to slide your mouse down there, you can feel it on the bottom of your skates. They also do have a tag up here in the top right hand corner that does label whether this is a control, balanced, or the speed option, and this tag is stitched to the bottom. I personally haven't noticed this tag being there at all the entire time that I've been using it, and even though it is on the bottom of the pad, I haven't noticed it adding any type of additional slipperiness or causing it to lose any type of grip. So I do feel like they've done a really solid job with the placement on it. So for the first option, let's talk about the control surface. This was the choice of FaZe Souls. You do notice a bit of a texture there, rubbing your finger along both the Y and the X axis. So out of all the 3 versions, this one definitely does have the most abrasive surface. And though the performance of the surface is unique to its own, I would say that it somewhat kind of reminds me of a Aqua Control Plus, or even the FreeFall SV Base Control Plus as well. So the way that this pad performs when you're using it in game is you do get a really controlled glide along the dynamic friction. As you start to add weight on top of your mouse or push into the surface, it gives you a much greater sense of control and even stopping power. Like as I was pushing into this and using it, you're able to stop very well, but if you're to maintain that pressure, it almost makes it kind of harder to move around just because of how much control you're actually getting there. If you were to loosen up on the pressure on it though, it does go back to a pretty smooth static friction. So using this pad, it's really great for TAC FPS shooters if you need to make really accurate flick shots with it and stop on a dime. But overall, the performance on this control pad, I feel like they've done a really fantastic job with it. And just showing this really quickly next to the FreeFall SV Base Control Plus, the dynamic glide speed on both of these really not that far apart from one another. Since this SV Base is much more firm, I do feel like this firmer base does give you a little bit less static friction and almost make this pad feel a little bit quicker as you're using it. Whereas over here on the SteelSeries Control, I do feel like you can push into it easier, and it does give you a greater sense of both control and stopping power when you're using it that way. So let's go ahead and we'll drop the glide test comparison between both of them. So next up we have the balanced option. This was the pick of Handy and Cyber. And I do feel like a pretty common question I'm going to get is which one of these three mouse pads is going to be closest to something like the QCK Heavy. The balanced option is going to be the closest one. This surface is made out of a tightly woven polyester, and this does have a bit less of a texture compared to the control option, but you still do feel a little bit of a texture there along the y-axis, and the texture is a little bit heavier on the y-axis than it is when you're rubbing your finger across the x-axis. So I do believe this is going to be the best option out there if you're someone who prefers something like a GSR SE or even something like the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn Pro. But one thing that I found so far when it comes to the performance of the surface is it does feel very consistent. Across the dynamic glide, you do get a somewhat faster glide, even though it still has a pretty solid sense of control. Even coming down here in the static friction, you don't get a whole lot of overwhelming static friction. So it is actually really easy to make any type of micro adjustments down here, but typical when you add more weight onto the surface, you do get a greater sense of control and stopping power. So as I was going back and forth and comparing this balance pad to all the other options that are out there on the market, I did find that the one that this kind of felt most closest to or similarly to, which is the overall properties, was the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn Pro. And when coming back and forth between both of these, I don't know, I kind of feel like, I guess maybe that this one, the QCK, does have just a little bit less of the static friction, but coming across the dynamic glide on both of these, honestly, they are not really that far apart from one another, just with the QCK having a little bit firmer of a base and a little bit quicker of the elastic or rebound properties. So let's go ahead and we will drop the glide test comparison between both of these. And next up, I'll be comparing the Balance to the QCK Heavy. For those of you that know with the QCK Heavy, once you do get this out of the box, I do feel like the dynamic glide on this is pretty quick, but the more that you use it and break it in, I kind of feel like it gets a higher sense of static friction, whereas you're putting a lot of weight onto this or pressing into it really hardly, you do notice a little bit more of the tugging going on. And I do kind of feel like with this new balanced version that I feel like it's just a little bit more consistent overall between the dynamic and the static. The dynamic on this one feels just a little bit slower and more controlled than my QCK Heavy, but when it comes down in the static friction, I do feel like it is a little bit smoother to move my mouse around there, though I wouldn't say that there's a huge difference between both of these. And I would say that the differences between the base, with the Heavy having a much thicker rubberized base, the elastic properties don't really seem like they're a whole lot further from one another. Might just slightly be a little quicker over here on the Heavy since it is such a thick rubber base, but over here on this new foam base, it does feel a little bit more plush and easier to press into. So let's go ahead and we'll drop the glide test comparison between both of these, followed up by some of the other pads that fall similarly in this category. All right, and then finally we got the speed option, and out of all three different versions, this one does have the smoothest filling surface. Though as you rub your finger along both the X and the Y axis, you do notice just a little bit of a texture there. And out of all of the pads that I did test this out next to, I would say this one does perform most similarly to something like the Lamzu Energon. So across the surface, you get that really quick and smooth dynamic friction, and even down here in the static friction, it has a really low static, so you're able to get really quick movements and micro corrections as you're using this. Even though you don't get as much control and it does feel a bit more slippery than the balanced or the control option, I do feel like for a speed pad, you're still able to get a still somewhat decent sense of control the harder that you do press into the surface. So here we got it next to the Lamzu Energon. For those of you that watch the channel know that I've highly praised this mouse pad ever since its first release. And with the SER style base over here with the Pro version coming from Lamzu, this is made out of a Poron. Even though the original one that Lamzu made did come out with an SER base as well, you're gonna get a little bit of a firmer and more consistent feeling over here on the SteelSeries base. But yeah, really the performance between both of these, I wouldn't say they're a whole lot further apart from one another, just with the overall dynamic glide and speed. So we'll go ahead and throw up a glide test comparison between both of these. And then lastly, I'll go ahead and compare it really quickly to the Artisan Raiden. This is the X Soft, so obviously this is going to have a much softer and a much more base to push into compared to something like the SCR base. I do kind of feel like the Raiden, it does feel just a little bit quicker, and I almost feel like it feels just even a little bit more slippery down here in the micro corrections when you put a lot of weight onto it. Not that it's a whole lot further apart from one another, but let's go ahead and we'll drop the glide test comparison between both of these. All right, guys, so that about wraps things up on the brand new SteelSeries QCK Performance Series mouse pads. And I must say that I am really impressed with all three of these different versions. I really feel like it does show that they put a lot of time and effort into developing these surfaces, as all three of them, they really do feel solid across the board. The only one change that I'd ask for them, and I did actually bring it up to them, is that we were to get a size in the future of a 500 by 500. So hopefully that will come out down the line. But as far as all three of them go, I'm going to go with the balance option as my first choice. I'm really liking this pad a lot, and this is honestly going to stick in my rotation as one of my top pads out there. And then a very close second, like I told you, being such a huge fan of the Lamzu Energon, this QCK Speed pad, it also does feel really solid as well. And not that I'm trying to take anything away from the control pad, I honestly really do feel like the performance of that pad does feel good. It's just a little bit too slow for my taste and what I generally prefer to use. So overall, I am really impressed with what SteelSeries was able to do with these brand new QCK performance pads. And if you're interested in checking any of these out, I can definitely recommend that you do so. All right, guys, so if you have any additional questions or feel like I left anything out, please let me know in the comments down below. Aside from that, if you've enjoyed watching this video and are interested in seeing more videos like this in the future, please drop this video a like and subscribe to my channel. And thank you guys so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.